Myanmar's junta leader, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, who deposed the country's elected government by force, is expected to be in Jakarta on Saturday for a special ASEAN meeting. The 10-member regional grouping is gathering to consider ways to restore peace in Myanmar. The general's attendance has been questioned by human rights groups who say any participation by the junta legitimizes, quote, the genocidal slaughter being committed by the military regime. Activists say more than 700 people have died in the military and police crackdown on protesters demanding a return to democracy in Myanmar. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says ASEAN has a crucial role to play to end the crisis, a crisis which plays out on the streets of the country every day.
They still have belief in Myanmar's democracy. Flashing the three-finger salute, a symbol of resistance, citizens have been protesting since the February 1st coup. But the demonstrations have often been met with lethal force. It's a crisis that looms over the region, and the United Nations hopes this weekend's ASEAN meeting could help bring a resolution.
ASEAN's role is more crucial than ever as the region faces an urgent crisis in Myanmar. I urge regional actors to leverage their influence to prevent further deterioration and ultimately find a peaceful way out of this catastrophe.
But so far, the response from the regional actors has been divided. Indonesia has taken on an active role. It says it has been pursuing a solution through dialogue and is hosting the ASEAN meeting. Jakarta also sent its foreign minister to Thailand for the first international face-to-face with the junta government after the coup.
Safety and well-being of the people.
I conveyed that the safety and well-being of the people of Myanmar is the #1 priority. We ask all parties to exercise restraint and not use violence to avoid casualties and bloodshed. Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines have also voiced similar concerns. Others, such as Cambodia, are more reserved. Leader Hun Sen has refused to comment on the situation in Myanmar, saying it's an internal affair. And then there's Thailand. Despite feeling what it called gravely troubled by the casualties of the crisis, the country has been criticized for turning refugees away. We have spoken to those who entered Thailand and asked them if they had any problems in their area. If they say they had no problem, we just asked them to return. We ask. We did not use any force. Similar criticism has also hit India, a non-member of ASEAN, but a close neighbor of Myanmar. It sealed its northeastern border after a steady stream of people tried to flee into the state of Mizoram. According to the UN, at least 250,000 people have already been displaced by the junta's crackdown this year.
Evan Laxmana is a political scientist and senior researcher at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Jakarta and joins me from there. Welcome, Mr. Laxmana. Now, Indonesia has been pushing for this special leaders meeting for some time now. And now that it's happening, what can we expect from it?
Well, the best case scenario would be for the leaders to agree on a commitment to do two things. One is to ensure that there is an ASEAN-led mechanism to address the crisis in Myanmar. And number two, that mechanism should include a framework to end the violence currently, to deliver humanitarian aid, and to potentially facilitate a Myanmar-led and a Myanmar-owned dialogue process among all the stakeholders.
Now, human rights groups say that by talking to coup leader General Min Aung Hlaing, ASEAN is legitimizing his government. Do these people have a point?
I think what is happening right now is a recognition of reality, not legitimacy. Legitimacy is something the people of Myanmar has to decide from themselves. What ASEAN is doing right now is recognizing that currently the main goal of the summit is to end the violence. And the one that's doing the violence is the military. So therefore, we call the military to the summit to get them to stop the violence.
You also said earlier that it's important that all stakeholders in Myanmar sit down and talk. Speaking of those stakeholders, we're talking about the ousted democratic government. Would it not have been better to invite them as well to this ASEAN leaders meeting?
Again, the goal of the summit as it stands right now is to end the violence first and foremost. The goal of the summit is not to negotiate a settlement just yet, because for such dialogue to be taking place, we have to first end the violence and deliver humanitarian aid, which was necessary to create the space that would allow such a dialogue to take place. So it should be bear in mind that the summit or the meeting tomorrow is not a venue to negotiate settlement just yet. It is about ending the violence that can lead to that settlement down the line.
How united are ASEAN member nations in their approach to Myanmar? I mean, the leaders of Thailand and the Philippines aren't attending, and Thailand is also a major trade partner for Myanmar. Then you also have Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, which are essentially one-party states. So I'm wondering, how united is this grouping?
It is certainly not all united. I think different members have different urgency to the crisis. They certainly have different interests and stake with the crisis right now. So it is certainly not unified as it stands right now, which is why I think the process of convening this meeting took several months since the coup. It hasn't been easy, but I think we are at the precipice of a potential breakthrough if all the negotiations leading up to the summit goes well.
You belong to a think tank that does liaise a lot with the Indonesian government, and Indonesia has been one of the promoters, if I can call it, of this ASEAN meeting, trying to get everybody together, especially the Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore grouping. What exactly is Indonesia's game plan?
Well, our hope is obviously that any kind of solution to the Myanmar crisis should take place within an ASEAN framework, because I think this allows some acceptability by the parties in Myanmar, and that we can hopefully solve this without external parties. But of course, the ideal goal of getting there would require that the violence to be ended and we can deliver aid to that effect. And we've done this before. So this is not our first stance, which is why we always try to make sure that our first option is to try to solve this within the ASEAN family framework.
One last question, sir. Now, throughout its history, ASEAN member states have generally tended to focus on economic cooperation more than political issues. Is this a pivotal moment for the role that ASEAN ends up playing here?
I think it is certainly the case that the meeting itself is not scheduled, that this is not a normal ASEAN calendar year. The fact that Indonesian president has to call for a special meeting shows you the gravity of the situation. So it is certainly, on the one hand, not our first stance in terms of dealing with problems for Myanmar, but also the gravity of the situation makes it unprecedented. So which is why I think we should have to see what happens tomorrow.
Evan Laxmana, pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me.